This video is best experienced by listening. Video and added bonuses are provided, but are not required to experience this video in full. Please enjoy. From somewhere, a transmission. Connecting to network. Logged on. Executing chat algorithm. Cave. Cave story. Cave story. The story about a cave. And again, we're gonna drink a lot of water on this one. Immersion is a tricky, yet effective way to learn. Without the grace of a safety net, however, the ability to fail with minimal repercussions, one may be overwhelmed with accomplishing tasks presented to them. After a brief, text-based transmission sequence, Cave Story begins with the player controlling the protagonist Quote in a singular room. Quote rests on a small platform, alone in a dark space, with only a couple objects to his right, some water beneath him, and a door at the top of the screen. This room serves to teach the player the gravity of Quote's jump, that Quote will drown if they stay in the water too long, the box with the heart will completely heal Quote, and that the floppy disk saves the game. Furthermore, the player learns, again without negative consequence, that the proper way to exit through a door is to press down on the D-pad. This is in contrast to the following room, which then puts the player, as Quote, to the test, introducing enemies and spikes in a platforming space that the player must explore before they find the first weapon of the game, the Polar Star. Like the first room of the game, the player discovers the Polar Star in a room devoid of any real threat, allowing them to figure out the proper buttons to press to fire the gun without any adverse consequences. This gives the player a sense of confidence as they exit the room and shoot the bats that move vertically, the critters that hop horizontally, and another door, this time an enemy, so you shouldn't jump on it. Of course, you wouldn't know that, but the game is teaching you to watch your steps. All of these measures are used to warn the player of other potential threats they will encounter throughout their adventures. As an aside, the entire opening sequence of Cave Story is masterfully designed, and I encourage you to watch the video Cave Story's Masterful Game Design, a long-form analysis by Game Soup to learn more. But what I want to make clear is that, regardless of circumstances, regardless of the scenario one finds themselves in, learning takes time. And if there is a large amount of stress on the individual learning, it will take more effort. I'm a PhD student studying nuclear engineering. This is where I am in my life right now. My job is to learn as many things as possible that may be relevant to my research, while also understanding that I have no idea what I will need to know in order to succeed. Like Marcel Marceau, I find that most of my days are spent feeling my way through a dimly lit room, attempting to understand why a function in this FIFO queue constructed from a variety of pointers is creating a segmentation fault, for example. Or why the Shockley-Raymo theorem produces different signal responses for semiconductor crystals when interacted with by a gamma ray versus by a neutron. Which, fun fact, I was editing the script, I actually figured out why this is the case, and it has to do with how each particle interacts with the matter, so yeah, now I know that one. Or why this MLEM algorithm only works if you are trying to maximize the logarithmic likelihood of occurrence. This past semester, I spent most of my days attempting to learn as many things as possible in a very short period of time, including how to program in C++. I knew going in that it would be difficult, but as someone with essentially no formal programming experience, because, let's be real, MATLAB isn't a programming language, it's a handy tool to do data analysis, I found myself under an immense amount of stress. All through my academic career, I have never been a stranger to having learned things very quickly. And this spans from my first education experience up until today. I have never been a stranger to having to learn things very quickly. And I often put a lot of pressure on myself to ensure that things get done in a timely fashion and at the level of quality that is desired, while still making sure that I understand exactly what it has taken to get there. This is how I got here, after all. From my first years in schools in a public Spanish immersion school, to studying for my PhD in nuclear engineering today. And this is how it was for me from January until April 2022. Studying programming in C++ at a breakneck pace as a means to continue my doctoral learning experience. I did not grow up a programmer. Despite all the video games I played as a child, I never looked into the mechanics of why things worked the way they did. Instead, I leaned more into the artistic side of game making and the game making process. The map and level design. I would draw little dungeon maps for an Okami-esque game as a child, or create concepts about a dice-rolling game, concept kind of thing that merged the mechanics of Mario Party and Fire Emblem as a bored college student. But I never made efforts to actually breathe life into these doodles. When I was 14, I was tasked with the completion of the International Baccalaureate Middle Years Program final personal project, to which I chose to make a game in RPG Maker VX Ace. I was able to pitch my project with the promise of presenting my studies into game design and creation, but even then it was like giving an elephant a paintbrush and a blank canvas. The elephant may have an idea of how to rudimentally grasp the brush, an idea of how to apply color to the frame, but lacks the fundamental knowledge of human art. I designed dungeon maps and towns as my creativity allowed, but I never understood the fundamental skills needed to program a game that existed in my mind's eye. Ruby? What was that? And of course, I made the big mistake that many novice game makers often do, making a game far grander in scope than reasonably possible. My advisors must have known that I was not making the next Super Mario Bros., but they let me make the game anyway, all by myself. And as one may expect, the game was nothing impressive, full of bugs, lack of story progression hints, and in general a complete mess. Of course, I was too deep into my own creation to notice. By 15 years of age, I had made a video game as I stood atop the peak of Mount Stupid on the Dunning-Kruger curve. The ability to make a video game entirely by oneself has impressed me greatly since then. The inspiration for this personal project had come from the naive idea that, despite having no programming experience or understanding, I could make the next independent RPG Maker masterpiece. And to an extent, I was inspired by indie games as a whole, games made by people who worked by themselves. I was very impressed by their skills. Games like Yume Nikki and To the Moon were subtle motivators that worked well from the RPG Maker stance, but the king of these motivating, independent games was Cave Story. I first played Cave Story on the DSiWare service after getting my DSi XL for Christmas back in 2010. As an avid reader of Nintendo Power, I was following along with the reviews of all the exciting games coming to the DSiWare service, and this little pixelated platformer spoke to my 12-year-old DSi-lacking self. When I unwrapped the DSi XL, I went to the DSi shop and bought a multitude of games, Cave Story being one of them. I remember sitting in the living room on the couch jumping around Mimiga Town and the Egg Corridor on Christmas night, telling my mother that I really like this game I just bought. It was a good $10 well spent. She smiled in the way that parents do when their child is trying to appear mature, said she was happy I was happy, and then asked me to turn the game music down. I wouldn't learn that this game, Cave Story, was made by a single person until almost 2 years later, when I read that Cave Story was getting a 3D version on the 3DS as a launch title. "Wow," said the naive teenager. "One single dude made this game? That must have taken a lot of time." Not once did I bother to ask myself how someone might have created the foundations of having A be jump, or B make the player character shoot. Because, let's be real, RPG Maker was probably not going to teach me the exact skills I needed, only act as a handy tool to do level design. I walked into the lecture hall at the start of January, uncertain of what to expect from this C++ course. I knew that there would only be 5 graded projects for the course, but that they would be the only true ways to test my learning. There were no coding exercise homework assignments, specifically given by the instructor that I would be able to use to test my knowledge. Though, if I had the time, I probably could have found some on my own to practice. But of course, being in 3 graduate-level courses often provided very little time for other things, especially if I wanted to spend time streaming, or time with my girlfriend, or time sleeping, or anything, working out even. So, time is a balance. Anecdotes from peers about having to stay up late to finish projects did not scare me. This was something that I was well accustomed to from an undergraduate degree in engineering. I was much more anxious about the difficulty in understanding the variety of new concepts being thrown my way that I would have to grapple with by myself. It is not a mistake that I pursued a degree in engineering, a field where collaboration is not only encouraged, but expected. Collaborating with my peers to discuss what worked well for them and what they thought could be improved for a future assignment was par for the course on most assignments. And doing homework together late into the evening made for a learning environment in which I could thrive. Individual programming projects are required to be done completely and individually by the student, read the syllabus. It is your responsibility to ensure your programming project code and specific algorithm design is protected. If another student obtains your code or design with or without your knowledge, you have violated this policy. In other words, the antithesis of my learning. There was a lot being expected of me in a very short period of time, without the comfort of a safety net. Hi, this is Voltage in Post reminding you that grades are effectively bullshit and an antiquated concept, but this video is not for describing that. More about it maybe another time. For now, just know that everything was graded and I needed an A. Fucking hate grades. Anyway, back to the cave story. The lovely thing about Cave Story is that the difficulty increases naturally as you progress through the game. In game dev speak, Cave Story has good flow. You begin in a dangerous space, the first cave, but it is very easy to grasp the mechanics. From there, you're able to play around in a nice little sandbox known as Mimiga Town, where the obstacles are, again, present, but few and far between. And by the time you move onto the Egg Corridor, Grasstown or Bushlands, and the Sand Zone, you're able to easily see your progression and skill grow, with new monsters that challenge your movement and use of the newly leveled weapons that you may or may not have chosen to grab over the course of the adventure. It is very easy to fall into an initial impression that Mimiga Town is a kind of hub world, and that each time you go through the new respective zone, it feels as though the cave system is broken into a specific set of levels, with the teleporter in Arthur's house acting as an equivalent to a level select menu. But then you hit a wall. You face a new obstacle. An unexpected event that throws you for a loop. This occurs in Cave Story at the end of the Sand Zone arc, where the player is thrown into the dungeon known as the Labyrinth, a hellish cavern where there is little hope of escape. This is where the game begins to tell the player, hey, this isn't going to be a fun little romp through a cave system. You're going to have to find your way out of here, and maybe you'll learn about where you are along the way. It's daunting. The first room you find yourself in, While you have a new weapon, King's Knife, that is actually quite effective at taking out the new critters in the vertical shaft, it's still a long climb to the top. However, by the time you're finally thrust into this scary and unfamiliar space, with no hope of immediately returning back to Mimiga Town, you do have two things. The necessary platforming skills to reach the top and begin your journey through the labyrinth, and the confidence to pick yourself up and try again, even if you fall back down to the bottom. And it certainly helps that there is no fall damage in the game. If you miss a jump and fall back down to the bottom, you have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and try again. The first two projects of the C++ course were relatively straightforward. The first project involved creating a simple program that computed a numerical integration of a third-order polynomial using Riemann sums, something that I had done in high school. The second project was only slightly more complicated, and involved using object-oriented programming to create an image array, with each element in the array having an integer color value for red, green, and blue, respectively. These projects tested my skills and understanding of general programming, and I came away from each project feeling comfortable enough. By design, spring break bisected the course such that students could have time to rest and recover before the next project, Project 3, was released. For anyone who's taken this course, Project 3 will fill them with absolute dread, with a queasiness of treading uncertain and potentially dangerous terrain. For the unaware, Project 3 involved creating a program that read in a .ppm image using dynamic allocation to create the general image object. This programmed process allowed a user to do the following: encode a hidden message from a text file into the image using steganography, which is the process of slightly changing the colors in the image that are otherwise undetectable to the average viewer. Decode a .ppm file into the base colors based on a decoding algorithm, or export the current operating .ppm file. Through all this programming, any and all error checking situations needed to be accounted for, including, but not limited to, having an empty red.ppm file, having an invalid.ppm file, having too many color components in the pixels of the red.ppm file, having too few pixels in the red.ppm file, have a color value that was greater than the maximum allowed value, having a color that was lower than the minimum allowed color value, and so on and so forth. And this was maybe a quarter of the error checking cases. In addition to all these situations, Project 3 was the first project that required the use of a header block and compiling a program using a makefile. For those of you who don't know exactly what those are, it's like making a pegboard and you have to fit each peg into it, and the makefile compiles everything. It's a little tricky to explain for someone who's not really a computer science major, but it allows the program to be made using all of the things necessary. It's like using every building block, every Lego piece in the Lego set. Projects 1 and 2 had been more or less contained into a singular file, dense and over a couple hundred lines long, yes, but a single file. Project 3 was using new to me, but standard practices that, in programming, did not quite click at first. I had only 2 weeks to figure out how this project worked front to back, design the algorithms for each function, implement the error checking, and make sure it worked exactly as intended. And here I was, day 5 of 14, still stuck on the syntax. I remember that it was a Thursday afternoon when I was recommended a video by YouTube's algorithm, which, you know, what the fuck? Ad-libs something about how you should probably like and subscribe to this video because it helps with the algorithm? What was that supposed to mean? The previously mentioned Cave Story Flow video. And as I was listening to it on my way home from the office, it hit me. Cave Story was made in C++. From those humble Christmas days to that very moment, I had not put two and two together to understand that the programming language I was working with was the exact same programming language used to make one of my favorite games. And so I got home and immediately started Googling, trying to find any kind of cave story source code on the official website. While I found no exact results, I did find tutorials and GitHub repositories of tutorials to recreate the game's engine. And it was exactly what I had been looking for. Because, in order to make the game, there needed to be a number of files, and these files had header blocks, and those were used in a makefile. It was exactly what I was looking for. It was a simple yet effective way to see what kinds of syntax mistakes I had been making, because I was able to look at examples of code that were not relevant to my project, but were still similar, and I was able to see where I was making specific mistakes. Because Lord knows I was just staring at my code, trying to figure out exactly what I had done wrong in, for example, my makefile. And the best part of these examples that I found was that they were very easy to follow. It was perfect. And it was well within the realm of academic integrity because, as I said before, I was not using any of this code to supplement my own design. I was merely seeing how to properly implement my pound include safeties or head files as an example. And then, after carefully processing everything, I began to code, and code, and code, all the while listening to the Cave Story soundtrack. There was something inspiring to the fact that not only was the general engine for the game made in C++, but also the entire sound library as well. I was programming in C++ while I was listening to music made from something programmed in C++. And yes, you could say iTunes and Google Maps and other programs that I use on a regular basis, or used on a regular basis, were also made using C++. But that undermines the whole thing. It was cool in the moment. It rocked my world as I continued to make my various for loops. Now, I'm not going to outright exaggerate and say that Cave Story saved my grade! It did not lift up my grade from an F to an A. I was never at an F over the course of the semester. Everything was fine. Cave Story did not bring my grade from failing to passing. That was my own work. I still went ahead and got helped with the teaching assistants as needed, and I did go to office hours from 7 to 9 at night on a Monday evening, and that's why I wasn't streaming that night. But it was that epiphany that Cave Story was made by one person in C++ that allowed me to advance beyond one of the many barricades in my way to finishing the project. The epiphany also provided me with something else though. A deeper appreciation for the entire game, Cave Story. From the music, to the movement, to the combat, to the level design. This C++ course was the key that unlocked an even greater understanding of the way games are made. And to think a single person made this using this kind of language that, 2 months ago made no sense to me. They'd made this game over 5 years. As someone who struggled through maybe 4 months of projects using C++, thrown off the deep end, and trying to just stay afloat, I cannot even imagine the amount of work it must have taken to create something as mechanically sound and artistically enthralling as Cave Story. As I gaze upon my linked list stoplight simulator final project, with its rudimentary output and limited functionality, cars can't turn left or right, they only go straight ahead and they all go at once, I can smile to myself with the knowledge that so much more is possible with these tools, and knowing that, should I want to, I have the skills now to use these tools for my own development goals. Will I be doing that? No, probably not. Not in the immediate future, that's for sure. I have plenty of other deep, dark oceans of projects in which to immerse myself. Including a PhD. And streaming. And voice acting. And also just being a good relationship partner and, running. That's a big one. But making these videos too. I would like to thank Daisuke Amaya for his work on this game, and his ability to create a game that continues to motivate me even today. Without his work, I probably, I don't want to exaggerate, maybe I wouldn't have gotten an A in that course for the semester. Maybe I would have gotten like an A-. I still believe in myself, but having that extra little push was so very helpful. And more importantly, I was able to learn the proper ways to use this programming language, C++, effectively, by example. And that's why I like Cave Story. I have a greater appreciation for the amount of work that went into it. Cave Story. You should play it. You can download Cave Story for free at www.cavestory.org. That's cavestory.org. To download it and play it, you'll have to download the main game in Japanese and apply an English patch. There are plenty of other languages on there as well, including Arabic, Brazilian, Chinese, Dutch, French, German, Italian, Korean, Lithuanian, Polish, Portuguese, Russian, and Spanish. You can also play it on Mac, Linux, and other servers. You can even play it on Game Boy Advance, if you know what you're doing. Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you so did enjoy it, please leave a like, subscribe, comment on a game that maybe inspires you. I'm very excited to put these out and continue making more videos. Thanks again. I really hope you can get the chance to play Cave Story if you hadn't. It's one of the best indie games of all time, and it was made in 2004. Some of you maybe watching this might be younger than Cave Story, which kind of scares me, but hey, what can you do? It turns 18 this year. Holy moly! So please, like, subscribe, comment, play Cave Story. Those are my 4 requests. See you for another video.